David Felmley became the 6th president of Illinois State Normal University in July of 1900. He had come to ISNU in 1890 as President John Cook's hand-picked successor to take charge of the mathematics department. He soon was ranked one of the best teachers at Normal and was known to be clear, logical, thorough, a forceful speaker, and possessing an uncanny memory for facts and names. The faculty were pleased that with Felmley, the tremendous work just completed during the whirlwind year of Arnold Tompkins would not have to be done again. But stagnation would not be possible under David Felmley. In the early part of the 20th century, Illinois led all states in the number of one-room schools. However, many of the rural teachers came from urban areas and knew nothing of rural life. For ISNU, an arrangement was made with the Walker School south of Bloomington. Students traveled by trolley to observe teaching in the model rural school. A remarkable esprit de corps grew among the student teachers who styled themselves the pioneers and became valuable crusaders on behalf of better country schools. On campus, Felmley had begun a crusade for a domestic science department. Although there was much urging for schools to provide such training, few normals west of Indiana offered domestic science. Illinois State could again blaze a new trail. Felmley had also asked teachers to begin the process to put ISNU among the first to recognize the need for training teachers in typing, stenography, bookkeeping, business methods, and commercial law. When space became available in Cook Hall, a new commercial department was established. In 1913, the university initiated programming in agriculture. High schools were calling for teachers of agriculture, and by spring of 1914, the university had constructed a farmhouse, silo, barn, and hog and chicken houses. Before anyone could have anticipated, ISNU was in the dairy business. By 1915, it was impossible to cover the expanding milk route with even 2 horses. So a Ford car was purchased to take care of the $18 per day sales. By 1916, enrollment was setting records. New teacher certification rules were a considerable influence. Additional teachers were employed, and rooms in the public schools were used for overflow classes. Felmley's long-range plans for enriched curriculum included training in the manual arts, household arts, dramatics, and music. Courses in these fields, however, would not be offered to any extent until more space was made available. Perhaps one of President Felmley's more unique contributions was his quiet but no less determined pursuit of a reform known as simplified spelling. He found himself in the company of the likes of Theodore Roosevelt and Mark Twain, but not everyone shared his enthusiasm. The principal of the Chicago Normal School replied to one of Felmley's letters,
"After careful and painful effort, I have succeeded in translating your deformed spelling into my own vernacular. I make out that the world looks pretty fair at Normal."
In the early 1900s, a diploma from a normal school no longer constituted a certificate to teach high school. The larger Midwestern universities were standardizing and accrediting high schools, and in doing so, insisted that graduation from a recognized college was required for high school teachers. The normal schools were under attack and were accused of being out of touch with the educational life of the state. Felmley and the presidents of other normal schools established an association to coordinate their fight. They were on the defensive, but they also knew they needed to revise their curriculums if they were to command the respect of accrediting agencies and the University of Illinois. They agitated the legislature for permission to grant a professional degree. Strong opposition was felt from the private colleges who saw the move as threatening to their existence. The Normals offered reassurance that they had no desire to invade the domain of liberal arts colleges and would confer only professional degrees. The legislature provided the right to Normals to grant professional degrees in 1907. The private colleges might have been appeased, but the University of Illinois was still a threat. Felmley became especially apprehensive in 1910 when the University of Illinois requested $250,000 for a school of education building. That one building would cost more than the state had expended for all the buildings at ISNU. A member of the Illinois State Normal Board said, "I believe the chains are now forged and we are beaten." Felmley vowed to fight, enlisting the support of other normal schools, and ultimately caused a compromise wherein the Normals would not try to block the U of I appropriation if it included a highly expanded program for the Normals. The fight for the U of I acceptance of the new teacher college degree, however, would continue for some time. Although the board had always been in sympathy with the plans to beautify the campus, it took a tremendous storm in the spring of 1902 to make things happen. The campus was left in shambles. After the buildings were repaired and the fallen trees and shrubs removed, the university hired John Gregory to take charge of the school grounds and gardens. In 3 months, he planted 350 trees, 254 flowering shrubs, and 113 climbing vines. Recognizing the university's leadership in the manual arts led to a legislative appropriation of $110,000 for a new manual training and domestic science building with an auditorium. The Industrial Arts Building, later known as Edwards Hall, was completed in 1909. Having secured the Manual Arts Building, Felmley initiated a proposal for a new training school that opened its doors in 1913. It was named for Thomas Metcalf. The old training school was converted into the library and quiet classroom space. A year later, the Women's Improvement League and heirs of Jessie Fell erected an imposing gray sandstone Fell Memorial Gateway at the east entrance to the campus drive. For 65 years, one of the needs of the school had been dormitories. The legislature finally granted $95,000, far less than the plans demanded, and the site of the old lily pond south of the gymnasium was chosen for the new dorm. The building would be named Fell Hall in honor of Jessie Fell, founder and friend of the university. However, the contractor defaulted, and it was late spring 1918 before the building was ready for occupancy. And it would be 30 more years before the south wing was completed. Despite warnings that the Budget Committee would consider only those buildings that were absolutely necessary, Felmley drew both long and short-range plans and stated his case for each. He listed first a $225,000 gymnasium. By 1923, the request was whittled down to $150,000, and the gymnasium had to be built without some much-wanted features. He asked for a $250,000 science building that was ultimately funded in 1925. He also asked for a greenhouse and tool house, completion of the south wing of Fell Hall, a fine arts building, a second dormitory for women, and, reluctantly, a house for the president. In 1907, the university celebrated its first 50 years. Like the Bridgewater Normal of an earlier era, ISNU had contributed so many graduates to presidencies and faculties of other normals that it was often spoke of as the mother of Western normals. School parties, receptions, and banquets were held in the gymnasium. The fortnightly club succeeded in getting the board to open the gymnasium for dancing. When the gym teacher forbade the waxing of the floor, the students paraffined their shoes. And after each dance, a committee would scrub the floors. The junior-senior banquet was the great climax of the year. The reception was in the library on the second floor of the gymnasium, where the somber bookshelves were enlivened by potted palms and large baskets of flowers. Commencement took on a university atmosphere. An address was given by a distinguished speaker. The four-year graduates of 1917 for the first time posed for index pictures in cap and gown. Although some looked favorably upon a commencement with staff as well as graduates in academic costume, President Felmley was adamant in his opposition. As late as 1926, he wrote a faculty member, "Other members of our faculty are inflexibly opposed to this innovation. They think it detracts from the real dignity and significance of the occasion. I trust it will be a long day before you will need a master's regalia at Normal." Since 1909, Founders Day, February 18th, had become an occasion for reunion and reminiscence. A feature of the first annual banquet was an address by Captain John H. Burnham of the class of 1861, who told of the founding of the school. An innovation after the war was the homecoming each fall, sponsored jointly by the student body and the Alumni Association. President Felmley allocated $75 to a committee of alumni, faculty, and students for the first homecoming. Guests registered in the main office were given a souvenir booklet, a badge, and a bunch of wahoo berries. So successful was the affair that it became an annual event. When World War I came about, a movement was started to introduce military training. 2 hours of daily drill was offered to all men who cared to take it, but enthusiasm for broomstick parades soon waned. Many men left school, some to enlist, some to join units of the Students' Army Training Corps on other campuses, and others to return to the farm. When the number of men in the school dropped to 12, girls were encouraged to take up manual training and meet the demands for teachers in that field. In addition to classes, the campus hummed with wartime activities. A Red Cross auxiliary was organized to make surgical dressing and roll bandages. Courses in home economics were fitted to wartime needs for food conservation. Clubs rented plots of ground and started gardens. Peach, apricot, and cherry stones were brought to school and sent away for use in gas masks. Trench candles were made of old newspapers, melted paraffin, and wax. Thrift stamps were sold, and the university participated in many wartime funds. The news of armistice came out just after the big flu recess and before all the students had returned to campus. But those present joined the community in celebrating peace and victory. By the spring semester, a number of veterans were back in school. And for the first time, commencement featured an original production. And they did come back, a wartime review, with songs, dances, and music, as the program announced, written, directed, and produced by them. After the war, there was little doubt that enrollment in the college and normal departments would soon increase, and that limited facilities would be sorely felt. In league with the other state schools, Felmley drafted a budget that included an extensive building program and substantial increases in teacher salaries. He told the board that he had spent a large part of his time in the summer of 1920 trying to capture a $2,000 teacher with a $400 salary. Dean Manchester prepared a brief for salary increases. He asserted that faculty at Normal would have to ask for a 75% increase in salaries to put them on a level with the U of I, and he remarked that penuriousness in pay will be followed by strained relations, fleeting attachments, and penuriousness in service. To the economy-minded legislature, the requests were fantastic. Although the case for salary increases could not be ignored, they would grow slowly, and money for new buildings and repairs on the old buildings would be kept to a minimum. Intramural contests were looked upon with great favor by most of the faculty. However, they were not without incident. One of the devices used to arouse interest was a color rush, a mad, excited scramble to see which society would succeed in flying its colors high above the gymnasium or the old main cupola. The enthusiasm sometimes ended with windows shattering and banisters breaking. An athletics association supervised contests, sold season tickets, and organized yelling sections. Rowdiness and poor sportsmanship often accompanied the zealous spirit. The Varsity Club and Men's Athletics Association initiated sponsorship of the N Club, where membership was conferred on men who had earned letters in sports. These associations also spawned the Gamma Phi, a physical education fraternity soon to be noted for its annual circus. Numerous departmental clubs sprang up during this time, and National Greek Letter Honor Societies appeared, and neophytes learned the ancient alphabet. In 1920, a student council composed of representatives of the various clubs was set up to coordinate student activities and assist new students in adjusting to college life. In 1921, it published the Student's Handbook offering sage advice. Students were admonished not to use ink in the study hall except in fountain pens. For best home study conditions, a 60-watt light bulb and 68-degree temperature were suggested, and 3 baths a week were recommended. As the end of the 1920s came about, President Felmley privately reflected on his years at the university. There were so many things he wanted for the school, things for which he had been agitating a long time. Greater selectivity in admissions, improved standards for certification, and a positive assurance that normal schools would continue to train teachers for secondary schools. He wanted to see an adequate salary and retirement system to attract good teachers. He wanted a means for helping gifted but financially poor students attend college. He admitted quite frankly that he had not worked out solutions to all these problems, but he wanted to try a little while longer. However, the physical condition that had been harassing President Felmley got the upper hand in the late summer of 1929. He did not improve, but managed to continue working from his bed. Finally, he began to delegate to others the duties he had so zealously performed for nearly 30 years. Since he saw no hope for recovery, he suggested to the board that it would be best for the university if an able-bodied man was found to replace him. The board replied that Felmley should remain president until such continuance interfered with his own peace and happiness. The same mail brought word that the new science building would be known as the Felmley Hall of Science. Both letters pleased the ailing president. Nevertheless, the day after Christmas, he dictated his letter of resignation. But before it reached the board, he had lapsed into a coma. On January 24, 1930, he died at his home on School Street. He would be known for some time as the unforgettable Mr. Felmley. Herman Henry Schrader, a professor of education and psychology, was named acting president. In 1913, when he had only been on campus a short time, he met President Felmley in the hall on his way to class. Felmley inquired how things were going, but Schrader didn't stop. Taking out his watch, he called back, "I have never been late to a class, sir, and I will not begin now." Felmley turned to some students who were standing nearby and said, "Great fellow, Schrader." In the late May of 1930, the board announced that Dr. Harry Alvin Brown, president of Wisconsin Teachers College in Oshkosh, would be the 7th president of Illinois State Normal University. He would lead the university into one of the darkest economic times in the country's history.